All right, so I just started the recording. So let us go ahead and say what this is. This is the Flood and Erosion Control Board. The date is Tuesday, May 19th, and this is our regular scheduled meeting. And if everyone can go around and say who is on the phone for the record, this is Becky Bunnell, Chair.
I am Dick Mahusky. I'm Secretary.
Don Lamberti, Vice Chair.
Peter Wiswell, Member.
And Prue O'Brien, Recording Secretary.
Okay. All right, so I would like to officially call the meeting to order. And with that, we could, right now, I guess Paul Landino we're still waiting for, so let's give him 2 minutes just in case he joins. But if everyone could pull up the minutes that Prue sent out earlier today, that will be our first order of business.
Yeah, the draft minutes. Yeah. Yeah, I did have one question on there, but guess we can wait a minute.
No, go ahead.
Okay. On item 2 in the middle, it says the idea would be to sit down with the town and with DEEP and agree a height and joint. I'm not sure a height and joint jurisdiction. I'm not sure what that means. Agree to a height, and then who has jurisdiction? What does joint jurisdiction mean?
So maybe we can clarify that by saying agree to a height and how.
Who has jurisdiction?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And who has who has jurisdiction? Maybe that's the way to say it.
Yeah, agree to a height and who has jurisdiction or something like that.
Is the thought going around that there might be, quote, joint, end quote, jurisdiction? Or is it just a question of who will have jurisdiction?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that DEEP has jurisdiction a certain amount of feet from the coastal jurisdiction line, and so likely that is going to cover most of the peninsula at that point, but it doesn't necessarily cover all of the situations that might come. And I guess the other question I have is, are there guidelines that DEEP has, or are there regulations that DEEP has? Because the difference between a guideline and a regulation is a fairly large one in my mind. So a guideline is a subject for discussion. A regulation is something that is permitted by law in my mind. And Peter, please correct me if I'm misstating that.
That's a pretty broad categorization. But generally speaking, that's true. But you can have a reg that provides for very broad authority and significant autonomy on the part of an agency, such that they can promulgate regs that haven't even been thought of yet. So it gets kind of gray.
What is the difference between a statute and a regulation? I am under the impression that a statute is a statement adopted by a legislative body. A regulation is detailed interpretation of that statute by a department charged with the responsibility of executing overseeing that statute.
Dick, as a rule, you're absolutely right. The legislature enacts legislation, and that legislation provides authority to call it an agency to promulgate regs. Notice of intended rulemaking, i.e. regs, is initiated, circulated in the public, and then ultimately the regs come into law. But It starts with the statute, which authorizes an agency to promulgate, and then the regs follow, just as you suggested.
Right. So, and that's where if I disagree with how deep is stating a regulation and how they are requiring me to act so that I am in conformance with their interpretation of their regulation, that's when I can go to court and say, Judge, their regulation is not in keeping with the intent of the legislature when they passed this statute. What do you think, Judge?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
is that right, Peter?
Dick, it can be two parts. You can challenge the underlying statutory authority in court, and
on the basis of a constitutionality question, kind of thing.
It could be, yes. And then you can also challenge legally. Let's just call it legally for a moment. You can challenge the regs promulgated by the agency. Now, oftentimes, challenging the statute goes to a state or federal court, whereas challenging a reg will go to an administrative judge.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, back to the point of the word joint. I think it reads fairly if you just replace the word joint with who has, so it reads to a height and who has jurisdiction. Because the state has jurisdiction waterward of the CJL. The town has jurisdiction landward of the CJL. The state has jurisdiction over the coastal plain, which is within 100 feet of the either CJL or high tide line. I forget which.
Right.
So there's an overlapping of who's on first, who's on second there.
Dick, may I suggest for consideration that you keep it open-ended and say something like, and agree to a height and appropriate jurisdiction.
That's fine.
If it comes
to me.
If it comes to a fuss relative to where the line is, you want it to be as gray as possible.
Yeah, and because that's exactly what we're saying. We don't know, but we have to find this out.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Joint will inspire Deep to just say no go, whereas if you say something like appropriate,
I think that's an excellent replacement word. I think.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Prue, can you make that edit then?
Yes.
Are there any other comments on the minutes?
Okay, just one other question. The very next thing. Okay, go ahead, Dick. You go ahead.
No, I was going to go farther down. So if we're in that area, go ahead.
Okay, say the next thing says Becky Burnell would propose getting the bulkheads back to 8. You're not proposing that they take the existing ones and raise them up retroactively, are you? You mean you want to get the regulations for future stuff?
For future stuff, but also I would like to allow current homeowners who were requested to work with lower bulkheads and embankments to be able to choose to go to a higher level should they want. So it would certainly be future, but also be retroactive for those homeowners who want it. It would not be mandatory, but it would be an option.
Okay, as long as it's optional, we can't demand they do it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
You have to clarify that it's optional, discretionary. The way it reads now, it looks like everybody's going to have to raise it to 8 to 10 feet.
That's what it sounded like to me. I said, we can't do that.
So maybe the language is, as B. Bunnell would propose, a bulkhead height of, going forward of, 8 feet, which was the approved height of the town prior to Deep changing it, with an option for residents to retroactively conform to that or something.
What you said would propose an optional bulkhead height of up to 8 to 10 feet, and then what you said, Becky, just say an optional.
It's not. I mean, I would actually propose that is the minimum.
Mandatory.
A minimum going forward, a minimum bulkhead height of 8 feet, and to be very specific here, the original 8 feet was prior to the NAV 88 change. So technically, in today's NAV, that would be 7 feet. So what I really think it should be is 7 feet plus the 20 inches of sea level rise that we have been asked by the state to do all of our planning towards. So it'd be 7 feet.
I think we're getting a little too hung up on the exact wording here. We're not trying to write the regulation. We're just trying to give a sense of what our conversation was.
So maybe it's 8 to 10 foot height. Let's keep that there. So propose a minimum bulkhead height at the 8 to 10 foot height, which was the approved height prior to deep changing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as I'm listening to that and looking here, I would strike the letter S from bulkheads and make it bulkhead. Yeah. I would insert the word heights so that it says would propose getting the bulkhead heights back to the 8 to 10 foot height.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Am I correct, Dick, that it's for all new construction or improvements?
No, the idea here is that we have a drawing that establishes the pathway of the bulkhead. That same drawing establishes that bulkheads will be built to 8 feet, 10 feet. Will be built to a minimum of 8 feet, maximum of 10 feet, stating it somehow. And then over time, individual property owners, perhaps with some subsidies from the town, perhaps with a grant from the state, individual property owners would improve the existing bulkhead, replace an existing bulkhead across their property, but that bulkhead would work along the established line and to the height so that eventually we have a line preventing the water from coming onto the roadway until the tide height gets to 8 feet, 10 feet, whatever.
Yep.
So we're just trying to set the parameters of many future projects so that they all work together.
Right, I agree with that.
So, Prue, do you feel comfortable that that you have language to make that edit?
Yes, I have B. Bunnell would propose minimum bulkhead height be 8 feet to 10 feet, which was the approved height through the town prior to deep changing it.
That sounds good.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah,
okay.
Very good. Yep.
B 8 to 10 feet. Yep, that sounds good.
Any other? So
I don't mean to be
comments.
too picky here, but that sure makes it sound like somebody that has one that's 6 feet has to immediately raise it to 8 to 10. That's not what we're talking about, are we?
No, we're not.
No, we're talking about going forward. Going forward.
Okay, so I'm just going to put going forward in front of minimum.
Okay, that sounds.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I think there's certainly an option for anyone who has a lower bulkhead to choose to retroactively make theirs in that 8 to 10 foot height as well. That becomes an option for that homeowner, but it's not mandatory.
Right.
Okay. Other
yeah, the way my copy printed out, this is on the top of page 2. It's in the first third of item 3. The line starts in addition, and then it repeats in addition.
Oh, okay. Cross that out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's all. And then on the next paragraph after that, FECB recommends moving forward with adding two to three alternate members. I have no appreciation of whether this is describing a sense of the body. Did we vote on a resolution? I would like to see some categorization of, and recommends. Who are we recommending something to? I don't think we're making a recommendation yet. This is
well,
that.
Actually, we are. If you go further down, we are. So maybe we should strike recommend and say discussed. In that FECB discussed adding 2 to 3.
That works for me.
Much better.
At the end of that paragraph, we actually say what our recommendation is, which is add the state statutes, add 2 full-time members, and with an option of 3 alternates that would have no term limits.
And so it says action items for future discussion. Do you want me to put here recommended items?
I would support that. Well, actually, where are you, Peter? You were going to actually confirm.
Yeah, I don't think this topic is fleshed out enough. I think that it needs to continue to be a discussion topic until we have a piece of paper that is a draft of what we will send to the Board of Selectmen. Then at that point, we edit that draft until we're happy with it, and then we make a motion to send that request to the Board of Selectmen.
Dick,
I don't see this quite as a resolution yet.
So let's say action items for future discussion and strike BOS.
If I can start with apologies to my fellow board members, having been a bit delinquent here, but I put aside some time this afternoon to do a draft that I have in front of me that I've not circulated, for which I again apologize. But looking at the action items, especially the first one, having now read through 85 through 94, I think we really need to discuss it more. But I mean, I have a draft that I'll get to everybody in the next couple of days. But I would emphasize in here, if it's appropriate, I wasn't at that meeting, but that all subject to further discussion after we've done.
Sounds like a good topic for next month. Huh?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is not mature enough to be put forward as a resolution.
Okay, so I'm going to propose 2 edits to the current minutes. So instead of FECB recommends moving forward with adding, FECB discussed moving forward with adding.
Yes.
Strike recommends and put discussed. And then at the bottom of that paragraph where it says action items for future discussion with BOS, strike with BOS, and just say action items for future discussion.
Okay. ...
Yes.
Yep. Done.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Because now, and just to circle back on this, you all have. I sent around an email on February 18th, which I attached a marked up section of our charter and state statutes, and that was my first effort at describing the changes that I see making in the charter and the statutes that back them up. So then whatever form you're going to come up with, Peter, we would have that document, and then at our next meeting we can just beat them all up and come up with a document that we can make a resolution to present to Board of Selectmen, and we can move forward with this.
Agreed.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so Peter, you whip that into shape and circulate it around.
Yes, sir.
All right, so any other comments on these minutes as we're finishing up this section of the meeting?
No, we can talk about Jim Wint and the comments on the POCD and that whole topic as a new topic in our current meeting.
Okay. So can I make
Because item 4, I have no difficulty with how item 4 is stated here.
Right.
So
Same
can I
here.
ask if anyone is willing to approve the minutes as amended?
I make a recommendation
Okay,
we approve the minutes as amended.
Is there a second?
Okay. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Dick, aye.
And Peter wasn't there. So these minutes are with the amendments are approved. So Prue, if you could just make those edits and then go ahead and we can post them as approved minutes.
Yes. Is Peter abstaining?
No, I approved.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Peter approves.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Okay. I'm just going to get my agenda in front of me now because I had the minutes in front of me before. All right, the next agenda item is review of the Flood and Erosion Control Board Master Plan and the 5-year funding plan and updates on the master plan. So I did not send that out again because as no changes to my knowledge, Dick, have been made since our last...
I did not update that or recast it in a similar format or anything.
Yeah, so we could just verbally give the group an update. We spoke with Laura Pooley and Bill Hurley just on some of the key projects, not every single one, but we can give an update on the projects as we have been updated, just so everyone is on the same page. Dick, jump in if I miss anything. So I think the one thing that's moving forward and is on track is the hardening of the wastewater treatment plant. Work has begun on that. They are working, and they will be working in stages to build up the road, and they are sort of forming the berm around it, and that is all on track and on schedule.
And I do attend the teleconference job meetings on that. We were having them every 2 weeks, and now we had one last week. We're going to have one again this Thursday because they're starting to physically drive the piles. So they shortened up the time between meetings just to keep everything in front of everyone. Becky, you heard me bring this out when we talked with Bill and Laura. At the early stages, UI and some of the telecommunications people about moving those poles, my sense was that they were just, we'll get around to it. There was no commitment to getting it done. But Laura says that that's now on track. They've had a couple of separate meetings with the utilities to get them on track and get their plan together. So it seems that everything is underway.
Okay.
Sounds good.
The next item we discussed was that they have surveyors that are surveying the heights on Fairfield Beach Road with the intent to come up with a plan to raise sections of the road. That is ongoing. They are having the surveyors out, work permitting roughly 2 days a week, and they expect to have all of the road surveys and tentative proposals on what sections to raise by late fall, early winter. It's sort of the timing that they're looking
at. Are they
at.
surveying the entire road or just part of it?
They're surveying from reef to the turnaround.
The whole thing, okay.
Yeah, but not going towards the beach club. So it's just the peninsula part of Fairfield Beach Road. And this is being done by...
They're not talking about raising just part of that the road there. They're talking about raising the whole thing?
We don't know. The objective is to establish facts that we can then put together projects on with the objective of eliminating sunny day flooding.
Okay,
so
sounds good.
Only sections will be raised. We don't know until they do the work.
Becky, may I ask a question to educate myself a bit? You said to the turnaround, that bit beyond the turnaround that says private and all that business,
Mm-hmm.
Is that truly private and the town has no obligation?
It is technically a private road. The residents in that section of the road have to do their own snow plowing, but there is sewer and water that goes through that, and the town has an obligation because of the property taxes to maintain the sewer and water and emergency services. But the road itself is considered a private road, and the maintenance of the road itself is considered the obligation of those homeowners.
Okay. So, and now, how about at the very end where it's to go into the creek where it's hardened? Is that a town obligation?
When you
No,
say
that's the Durrell property.
That correct? Yes.
And there's a jetty on there, right?
No.
Well, the whole end is with granite and whatever it is. Is that town funded?
No.
Well, it was done as
that property owner paid for that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And I know that from previous conversations in the board because Race did that work for the property. It was the property owner after Jackie Durrell, whoever they sold it to. So that only goes back, like, I'm gonna guess 4 years. That was done 4 years ago.
A couple years ago, completely renovated the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the time that armoring was placed on that house's property's shoreline.
Okay.
I didn't realize that.
Okay.
And Deep allowed them to put armoring there?
Apparently so.
I don't.
I'm
What
shocked.
armoring was septic? I thought that the jetty was pre-existing.
They have big stones. It's a stone jetty basically. It's a stone jetty, but it's sitting on top of the sand that was there.
Yeah, but that stone jetty's been there since I've been here, and I've been here 10 years.
Yeah, it was done in the 80s. The jetty at the end.
That jetty.
I think we're talking about two different things. I'd have to look. There may be a jetty at the end, but what I know for sure is that on the edge of the creek mouth, at what used to be the Durrell property, there are large flat stones placed on the sloping sand. And those great flat stones were placed there as part of the project to renovate the house. And I say that because Race did the coastal engineering to provide that erosion protection for the property.
Okay.
Sounds like two projects.
Yeah, I think that's two separate things. The next thing we had a quick update for was we had a question regarding the budget and whether that would impact any of the flood and erosion projects that are ongoing. And Bill was kind enough to send back a clarification of what there were certainly some budget cuts across the board, across all departments, certainly across sections of DPW, but to the best of our knowledge, none of the active flood and erosion control projects have been impacted by budget cuts. It mostly was DPW paving and some capital and some things that would now be bonded that were previously in operating funds.
Yeah, I sent the note around to Board of Finance saying that you're stupid cutting money. Lori, her last name escapes me. She's on the Board of Finance, and she sent the reply. And my current understanding is that the $2 million budgeted for repaving roadways was not cut at all. They just took $1 million of it and they took it out of the operating side of the budget, the charges this fiscal year, and they put it into the bond amount. So they're bonding half of the $2 million, but the total remains exactly the same. There was $300,000 put in the budget in order to rationalize our town fleet of vehicles that conservation uses, DPW uses, Charlie Jones uses, and that $300,000 was cut from the budget by the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance told them to go back and rethink the whole idea. And the last one was capital. Okay, now I'm drawing a blank. The other one was I know. There was $634,000 in there for DPW to replace vehicles. They cut that down to $330,000. They cut that in half, saying no, you can still keep using the old trucks, which I disagree with. None of that pertains to any FECB interested projects.
Sounds good.
So right now, the town engineers are proceeding as if we have a full approved budget, and they're actively looking at design for 3 to 6 containment basins, if you will, for the Rooster River area, and that design work is being authorized as we speak.
Sounds good.
And that was pretty much the update that I got. Dick, did I miss anything?
No, that was.
I have one question. When you drive down in the floodplain there, I see an awful lot of work. They're digging up the roads. Are they putting in sewer drains, or what are they putting in when they dig up the roads?
They're replacing the water main along Fairfield Beach Road. You know how they replaced the water? They replaced the water main out on the peninsula portion of Fairfield Beach Road, and now they're replacing the water main from the Jennings Beach Road, Fairfield Beach Road intersection all the way to the Sea Grape, and I guess they're tying it in.
Okay, so they're not separating the storm drain from other stuff.
This is the domestic water, the potable water.
Aquarian, yeah.
Okay.
But they did. Okay. But they did, just so you know, they did put in the budget, I think, $500,000 for storm drain upgrades as part of a kind of longer-term master plan to start, updating our storm drains around the town. So that, to our knowledge, is still actively budgeted or will be approved as part of the budget.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah. All right. So is there any other questions on our 5-year funding plan or master plan? If not, we'll move on to item 3 on call, which I think I'm going to propose we defer to next month, because that was going to be Peter's a discussion from Peter, led by Peter, on the town charter revisions and increasing the size of Flood and Erosion Control Board. And Peter, it sounds like you will be prepared next month to have a document that we can review and discuss and hopefully edit to the point where we're comfortable presenting that forward to the BOS as a recommendation.
Yes, but I'd like to make a couple of comments in anticipation of my circulating a draft, just to give everybody something to think about whenever you think it's appropriate.
No, this would be a perfect time.
Okay. As I said, out of an abundance of embarrassment this afternoon, I spent some time putting together a draft that I'll type up and send out, but a couple of observations. As I think everybody's aware, the statute allows us to go from 5 to 7. That's no issue. We can have the temporaries that we've discussed.
Well, they're not temporaries. They're alternate members.
Well, I was going to say, you'll see in my draft that I've suggested that we have alternates, and that from the ranks of the alternates, the full board members, as I have labeled them, ourselves, appoint a temporary within the parameters suggested by the existing charter. But I'll spell all that out. I need to see that in writing. I don't understand the interchangeability of the word alternate and temporary.
because the state statute terms them alternate members, and it clearly says that in the absence of a regular member, the chairman will appoint in rotating fashion an alternate member to serve in their stead.
And I am trying to thread the needle such that we can distinguish between the two, because I think at the moment, I think it's necessary that we attempt to distinguish, if it's not possible, and still stay within the parameters of the statute, then we can back off some. But I don't think that's going to be a particularly difficult issue. The biggest issue that I'm concerned about is the suggestion that we incorporate in the Charter not just that our authority is as per Section 25-85, but Sections 25-85 to 25-94. Now, I read it through a couple times this afternoon, but even at that, I can't remember all the different sections here. But what I came away with was, wow, do we want all that?
Yep.
And I simply
go and look at other towns' documentation, and other towns incorporate 84 to 94,
yeah,
whatever the numbers are.
And
you need all of that.
Hear me out that if somehow we could style the language to say something like 85 to 94 somehow at our discretion. Now, you're not going to get it completely at our discretion, but I think my point is I would love to have all of the authority given between 84 and 94, or all the responsibility given between 84 and 94. But are we qualified? Do we have the horsepower? Do we have the administrative help?
We have the engineering department, and we have consultants. The key to this whole thing is in the statute. Section 25-85 says establishment of flood or erosion control, and this is our authorities. Okay, the 25-84 establishes the fact that you can have a flood and erosion control board. Now you go to Section 25-85, and I'm calling this the authorities section. It says, establishment of flood or erosion control system. Such board shall have authority within the limits of appropriations, okay? And that is the key phrase. Within the limits of appropriations from time to time made by the municipality. 2, plan layout, blah, 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 and then you keep going on, and you say you can take property, and you can hire consultants, and you can set taxes, but all of these things are not done in our little FECB vacuum. They are done in consort with Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM, because all of these things require money.
Well, Dick, precisely, except I don't think it's, you say in consort, what if the town says, okay, FECB, you've got 84 through 94, we just allocated a big whack of cash to do all these things from 84 to 94. Now, do your job.
Fine, you give me all the cash. I'll hire consultants to do it.
I don't think they would do that, though.
No, they wouldn't.
All I ask is that everybody think about this, because at a lot of meetings we've talked about how we sure as heck would like a lot more authority. We'd like some money. We'd like a seat at the table. And I'm not saying we don't want that seat at the table. I'm just saying, oh, gee, what if they give it to us?
But Peter, I think without having all those statutes in our town charter, it's arguable whether we have a formal seat at the table. We have a hypothetical seat at the table with a very vague, remit. If we have the full charter of 84 to 95 behind us, we have a proper seat at the table. And to this point, we're not getting autonomous authority here. We're getting a seat at the table that allows us to make recommendations that have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM in conjunction with our partners, and town engineers and DPW.
Well, Becky, I think you phrased it very well with my taking two words away from it. Our partners, our recommendations. When I circulate this, and I have not thought this through enough, I can see, if it can be done, I think we should try to incorporate the full spectrum of sections within the statute, but we want to somehow get words in there like, hey, you guys, you're our partners, here are our recommendations, let's work together. Remember, you have to help us with consultants, blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to sound like too much of a coward, but those are things. I'm just suggesting that when I circulate this, we all think about whether we want some qualifying language that I have not put in, and maybe we don't even need it. I'm just throwing it out for consideration.
Okay. Let's look at it, read it, and see.
Exactly, yeah. I guess my point is, gee, when I read through all this stuff, I went, wow, there's an awful lot of stuff here.
But now the other slant that I have come away with on this whole thing is that given those enumerated powers in the in the state statutes, I'm thinking that if the town wants to execute any of those powers, they have a direct lickety-split way to do it because it's in the Flood and Erosion Control Board statutes. And they don't have to start reinventing the wheel to tax properties that are benefiting from a flood and erosion control structure that is built with town funds.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it gives the town a leg up on a lot of activities that someday they may want to take. Right now, today, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to spend 20 cents on this topic because everybody's now forgotten about Sandy. Ha-ha.
Point taken.
Mm-hmm.
Reading right here, Section 25-87. Bond issue authorized, period, assessments, period.
Right, yeah.
And I could see the town saying, wow, hey, that's pretty cool. How about a little general taxation? How about a special assessment, evidences of debt, and all that stuff? And they use us as their springboard to get it all.
Well, we would only recommend it if it was beneficial to the town residents in creating protection in a flood and erosion control manner.
Well, if it's in the charter, as authorized by the state statute, is the town obligated to go through us to get that bond?
Yes.
I don't know. Well, that's a question for our corporate counsel. But I don't know that we have executive authority for any of this. I mean, the first
authority.
Pardon?
We have recommendation authority, I think, and
right.
we can't make decisions without going through the BOS, the Board of Finance, and RTM on financial budget matters.
And anything that's executed on behalf of the town, the first selectman signs a whole lot of stuff because he is the chief executive officer.
Right.
So he has all the power, except as may be designated either in the charter or by him, from time to time.
Dick,
what would this allow us to do, though?
You look at 2594. It says agreements concerning navigation, flood, or erosion control. Any flood and erosion control board established under 2584, any such board or commission established by special act or any district having as one of its powers and purposes the right to construct or maintain a flood and erosion control system under Chapter 105 is authorized to negotiate, cooperate, and enter into agreements with 1, the United States, 2, the United States and the state of Connecticut, 3, the state of Connecticut, blah, blah, blah. I don't see anywhere in here that it says we have to go to the town. Obviously we have to go to the town, but where does it say it? And again, my apologies for being delinquent.
Your point's taken. It does say their officers, who is, that's today Becky would sign as our chief administrative officer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But she would be signing something that had the agreement of our town attorney, for instance, if there was some kind of agreement negotiated with DEEP or the Army Corps of Engineers or something, and such agreement, I am thinking, would have to be signed by our town's chief executive officer, because it's just illogical that a volunteer board member would obligate her fellow volunteer board members to something exclusive of how the town felt about it.
Dick, you phrased it better than I.
But Peter, is that how you actually read the 2584? That we actually have power to sign something without going through the town? Is that how you read that?
It kind of reads that way to me, yeah.
It simply says at 2594, now maybe I'm misunderstanding what Chapter 105 says, but it says acting through its officers is authorized to negotiate, cooperate, and enter into agreements with the United States, state of Connecticut, blah, 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 blah. Now, again, I have to read close, but...
I interpret that as that we can go directly to DEEP and to FEMA ourselves as a flood and erosion control board and try to negotiate things like bulkhead guidelines, for example.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Correct.
That we as the flood and erosion control board can go directly and negotiate on behalf of the town. We don't have to go through on those types of things. We don't have to go through the town, but on financial things where we're committing the town to funding and monetary outlay, I would imagine we have to go through the town because we're committing the town to something, and that includes bonding. But negotiating with FEMA or DEEP, we currently have the authority to go directly to them and negotiate certain things should we choose.
Do we have authority to negotiate with a non-town agency, whether it be state or federal, for grant money?
Probably. For grant money, something that's not obligated. Well, that's a good question. I mean, how do you read that? My read is yes, that we can apply for grants, if we wanted to?
If we apply for a $10 million grant, does that have to be signed off on by the town?
Well, it would, because most grants have a obligation of the town to pay some portion. So in that sense, my understanding is any time we obligate the town to money, we have to go through the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM.
Well,
but if we're not obligated,
theoretically, a lot of grants are without an obligation to repay. But they might have other strings attached. I guess my point is, I don't mean to get us off on too much of a tangent, but my reading of the state statute tells me it is incredibly broad, and that maybe whoever drafted the original FECB charter intentionally said 25-84 only, either out of sheer laziness or because he or she was intimidated at the Pandora's box that might be opened by going all the way to 94, 95. I don't have an answer yet. It's I throw this out as a cautionary note that I think we should all give some thought toward, and it even goes back to does the town insurance go as far as covering us to negotiate with the United States?
Well, I say we go and change the charter to grab all the power we can and then figure out how to execute it in the political world that we are surrounded by.
Dick, I agree, and I absolutely agree. My suggestion is that we put some wording in that gives us an escape route.
Oh, you have an escape route. This is a volunteer position. You can resign your position at any time. I'm thinking that it might be wise to put in our transmittal letter to the Board of Selectmen, like, Dear Board of Selectmen, we have attached changes to the existing charter that we believe will help our town move forward on the topic of flood and erosion mitigation, and then just describe how it might work in the real world. We would continue to work with the engineering department because the charter in another location, I believe, or maybe it's just in the job description, that the Director of Public Works shall be the town liaison to the Flood and Erosion Control Board.
I would simply suggest that we, a carefully crafted cover note is always very good, but those very conveniently get lost with time, and I think that between the group of us, we can get a few words in that give us the authority we want and protect us while working within the parameters of the town at large. I think it can be done, and I will, with the thoughts we've shared now, I will try to style something in there, but I just suggest everybody give it some thought, because watch what you wish.
No, I think you bring up good caution, and what I'm assuming is that we have the power. We can choose whether or not to exercise that power, but I personally would like to have the option to choose whether or not to exercise that power versus not having that choice.
Right. Yeah. And having those words in existence does give us a little bit of leverage with the other town entities to say, hey, help us out here, pal.
Yes. So it's a balancing of factors. We don't want an elected official in the town coming at us and saying, your charter says do this, damn it, you do it. At the
Fine,
same
give me the money, I'll hire a consultant.
But I think
perhaps at the same time we want to be able to say, we have this authority, we insist that you at least listen to us. You just have to balance it.
And possibly it also possibly gives us more authority to request budget. Even if the budgets fit in DPW, they are on behalf of Flood and Erosion Control Board. I mean, we don't have a budget to do anything, and that concerns me. If we're responsible for maintaining and overseeing flood and erosion control structures and have no ability to perform that task, we're not able to live up to our existing charter.
Yeah, we Rick and I kind of tried that with Tetro, and our approach was, hey, we think that the public works budget needs a line item for flood and erosion control. And he said, nah, Joe has money in there for consultants and stuff. He'll take care of whatever you really need. So that went nowhere. But I'm in agreement with that. Even if it's starts out with $2,000 for advertising or something for year one.
Well, I want to be able to. I mean, I really think that if we have an agreed plan with the town, we need to be able to execute against that agreed plan. So that's anyway. So Peter, I thank you for bringing this up. I think you're raising some really important issues in terms of what does adding those sections mean, and does that change our remit in a way that would make us unsuitable to do the job, and because we don't have the technical expertise to do it, which is something that I would be nervous about as well.
But at the same time, we should be able to style something that says we want 84 through 94, or whatever it is, but understand there are some guidelines that have to be followed to protect us all.
Right.
And this is not an insurmountable obstacle. It's just something we have to think about. And I commend Dick for pushing it as he has, because I think he's right. And Becky, I think you're right in saying we're kind of a lame duck if we don't get something in there. Let's just, I'll work on the wording a little bit more. I'll circulate it, and let's all take out our red pens.
All right.
Another question: the powers to be in town, are they going to agree to give us this authority? Do you think they'll ever agree to that we can have it?
We don't know until we ask, do we?
I thought we were going to demand.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you demand.
Yeah.
I would ask myself. Just one little minutia in the minutes from the 317 meeting on this topic. It says that 3 alternate members with no term limit, or words to that effect. I disagree with that immensely, and I would offer as a pony for the wording there the Plan and Zoning Commission, because they have alternates who are clearly identified and they have overlapping terms of something or other.
Dick, I absolutely agree, and I put in that it should be an arbitrary. I said 3 years. Otherwise, how do you get rid of them? It gets messy when you're trying to get rid of them. How do you motivate them? I'm on the exact same page with you.
So, do you want me to take that part out of the minute?
No.
Just
leave it. Just leave it there. It's not hurting.
Okay.
It's not hurting anything. Again, that was a conversation.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Dick, I addressed that and edit it as you feel appropriate.
Okay, so I'm going to move the conversation on it sounds like, Peter, thank you for listening to all these comments, and thank you for trying to figure out how to best incorporate them into a proposal of document for discussion. And we look forward to discussing that in the next meeting. And if you could send it out ahead of the time just so we could spend a little bit of time with it, I think that would be helpful as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would suggest that Peter do that sooner rather than later, and we can have a couple iterations back and forth before our meeting.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I'll be candid. The problem I have right now is, you all know I'm in the marine business, and I never expected COVID-19 to hit the marine industry as hard as it has. And we have gotten some wild problems that are just taking tons of time. But I think I have that pretty well behind me now. So I should be, and as I said, I have a draft done here. And if nothing else, I can just send this within the next few days. So I will comply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So moving on, is there any other new business or old business to be brought before the board for discussion?
Not really. None here.
Peter?
Becky, may I ask one question?
Yeah.
I think it was Lori who told us that relative to the storm sewer drainage, approximately in front of my house, that had prompted their looking at the storm sewer going down toward the sea grape, the storm sewer line down toward the sea grape, and they'd found that it was a little bit high, and there was a hump in the middle, and so it would not drain very well, but that they were going to do a further study. Has anybody heard anything more about that?
No, I remember that conversation as well, and I think I did not ask her about that when we had our update with her, so let me put that on the list to ask her for an update for next month.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one other thing that I want to just bring before the board, not that there's an action to be taken, but more just as a FYI. There was a brief discussion with Laura and Dick and Bill on the property that is next to Tom Mason's house, and I'm going to guess that's in roughly the 1500s. I don't know the exact number, but there is a...
It's 1492.
So, yeah, so property 1492 is a house that Tom Mason is tearing down and rebuilding as a spec house. And it originally had as a approved CAM back in the 80s a 9-foot retaining wall with some fill inside, and then the house was built on top of that. And as part of the interpretation of the FEMA guidelines for substantial improvement and or rebuilding, where FEMA says that you have to bring it up to current FEMA code, that retaining wall was considered by our zoning department and presumably by FEMA, in consultation with FEMA, as not in compliance with a flow-through structure because it was too much of a it interrupted the free flow of water. And so he was asked to take what is a 9-foot wall, which kept the creek waters from flowing into the street, down to a 7.5-foot embankment, which now will flood every time we have a high flood. And I was, and Dick was surprised and upset. And so I followed up with Tom Mason to understand a little bit more about why this was mandated, and he had to pay an extra $70,000 to take that wall out.
Wait. Has he, Becky? Has he done that already?
He is tearing the house down as we speak. His CAM was approved by Planning and Zoning. I don't know how it got by me. I thought I was checking all the Planning and Zoning meetings, but I must have missed this. So he has an approved site plan through the town, Planning and Zoning, through FEMA, through everything, and he is proceeding with the work. He is resigned to it. He did not propose that. He proposed keeping the 9-foot wall and building around it, but he was told he couldn't. And he had who was the individual that told him that? Was it Emmeline? Was it Jim Wendt? Was it Benkowski?
It was Emmeline, and apparently what Tom said is that he went in with one proposal, and Emmeline was of opinion that it would not pass FEMA, but she sent it up to the FEMA office up in Boston. Apparently now everything gets sent up to the FEMA office in Boston now.
Jesus! We are our own worst enemy. I swear to God.
And does that mean the height is now 7.5?
So the reason that the negotiated 7.5 was the midpoint of the two contiguous properties, one on one side, one on the other. And so it was sort of a negotiated height. It was not a FEMA directive. It was a negotiated height based upon the two properties on either side as sort of a midpoint of those two. Because it's 8'1" on one side and 7 foot on the other side, roughly. These are not exact. So he sort of got an agreement to that negotiated height. This was not his initial plan, nor did he particularly want to do this, but he was not really given much of a choice. And I just feel like as Flood and Erosion Control Board, the reason I'm bringing this up is as Flood and Erosion Control Board, I feel like we need to have a follow-up conversation with our town group at this point, our Planning and Zoning group, as a first step, and ask them to understand, help us understand a little bit more about how to balance these types of FEMA requests with site situations where we are endangering the health and safety of 220 residents through permitting additional road flooding. And there has to be a balance. And was that ever explained to FEMA when Emmeline took the plans up to FEMA, that we were now going to be increasing our nuisance flooding? I doubt it.
Becky, do you have a sense that Tom Mason went to Jim Wendt and said, "Hey, Jim, can you give your slant to this, because I don't know, you guys are killing me here"? Or did he just deal with Emmeline and said, "Okay, I'm not making waves because I do a lot of business in this town and I don't want to get people angry with me"?
He pushed a little bit, but his feeling was that, she and FEMA were firmly aligned in this one space, and that he sort of negotiated the 7.5, which he felt was a compromise, so he didn't have to go down to 7 and just meet the lower end. And he, his perception, and for these are not for necessarily the minutes, even though we're recording these, his perception is that there is a reticence on the behalf of the town to confront FEMA because of the Penfield situation, and that's a hypothesis. Because of all those related issues where they have the big hammer, and that can hit many of our nails that we're interested in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my recommendation and my suggestion is that we have an informal meeting with our town planning and zoning group and understand a little bit more about why they make the decisions they make, and understand a little bit more about, at what point are health and safety considerations brought into the mix as these decisions are being made. And I think that's a very appropriate discussion to have. And
Yes.
so that's what I'm proposing we do.
So that can segue into the letter you sent with Jim Went to have a conversation about the POCD and how these things just cavalierly get no further action necessary when they're kind of ingrained in our overall scheme of how we keep the water out.
Well, that was not the POCD.
So this is just another aspect of that.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
we
right.
get no respect.
Becky, am I understanding?
Well, I mean, it's not us taking it personal. I view us as representing the interests of our floodplain dwellers in town.
I agree with you 100%.
Our job, I feel, as authorized by the flood and erosion control statutes, is to think about flood and erosion control as it impacts our town residents. And
there you go.
This is an issue that appears to me to be a issue that is going to lead to further flooding at high tides. And I think that has to be brought into the conversation when these decisions are made. And if people decide that it's okay to have more nuisance flooding because it's more important to have the FEMA guidelines followed, then at least we've had the conversation. But I feel like the conversation has to be had.
Yeah, I agree
with you.
100%.
Becky,
On a related issue, I have a call out to Brian Carey, and I haven't really pushed him, but I will do that. Because one of the questions I have to him is, so what's happening with FEMA in Washington, D.C. about the Penfield thing? Is FEMA like, COVID-19, we're on sabbatical, working from home, can't really respond to your question, even though we're past the 90 days that we have to do it? So I have no idea where that stands.
Becky, so that I be sure that I understand what you're describing, when we were going through the minutes, we talked about 8 to 10 foot height for bulkheads.
Yes.
Now, Tom
Right.
Mason.
Tom Mason has a 9-foot wall that he's taken down to 7.5 feet.
So we're talking 8 to 10 feet down the road. All the good that we might do there is being poured down the drain at Tom Mason's location.
Right.
Right, but if we could get an agreement to go back to an 8-foot height, which again, let's be clear, the 8-foot height was pre the NAV 88 revision, so it's actually a 7-foot height plus 20 inches. So let's call it, an 8.5 foot in today's NAV world.
Still well above Tom Mason's height.
Yeah, we would be. It's too late for Tom Mason. We've missed that boat. But if we could get this agreement, things like the Tom Mason situation wouldn't happen, because he would be allowed, at least, even if they told him to take the 9-foot wall down, he could take that 9-foot wall down to 8. 7 feet 20 inches, so almost 8.5 feet, virtually almost a 9-foot wall. In essence, what Tom Mason had is pretty much what we want it to be going forward. But right now we're not empowered to do that. We haven't had the discussions with FEMA and with DEEP, and those discussions have to be had. And I want the town on our side when we go to them. I think this is something that the town needs to support from a flooding standpoint, a nuisance flooding standpoint of our residents.
Well, this might be why we need 84 through 94.
Yeah. So the first step, the reason I bring this up is I think I'm just letting people know that I'm planning on setting up a meeting with our town zoning and planning and zoning group, Emmeline and Jim, at this point, to start that dialogue, because I think it has to be started, and we have to start engaging all of these issues when these decisions are made.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
So that was my piece of new business, if you will. Are there any other pieces of new business?
Nothing
All right.
here.
Do I have? Then I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Second.
A second.
Okay. Well, thank you all for getting on, and
All right.
No, we have to vote. All in favor,
right.
say aye.
Aye, Don, aye. Okay, thanks a lot.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right, thank you, Prue.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Care all. Bye.